I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which I live and work, the Yuwut and Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to all First Nations, including Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who may be watching today's episode.
Because what I realized is that both of those really kept me in these cycles of burnout. When we go through something traumatic, we experience diminished creativity. And what's wild to me is engaging in creative acts actually brings it back and helps us move through trauma.
Welcome to Shit Sparked, the podcast that gets real about addiction, mental health, and everything in between. I'm Paris, and I spent 17 years battling the bottle, 10 years hooked on meth, and I also did a stint in the escorting world, which nearly cost me everything, including my life. With both lived and professional experience, including qualifications in alcohol and other drugs, I'm here to share what I've learned along the way. Every journey is unique, and this podcast brings you stories, insights, and practical tools to help you find what works for you. Now, just a disclaimer, we dive into some tough topics here, including addiction, all forms of abuse, trauma, mental illness, suicide, self-harm, and the realities of life in recovery. These discussions can be intense, so please take care while listening and just make sure you're in the right headspace too. Don't forget to follow or subscribe to the podcast. Your support actually helps us more than you know, and it's one of the best ways to keep these conversations going. I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to the show, Molly Schenck. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, and thank you so much for having me. I really am excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to get into this conversation. So if you wouldn't mind telling us, whereabouts are you tuning in from?
Yes, so I am currently in Maine on the East Coast of the U.S., and this is where I was born and raised. I've been living and working the past 15 years in the Southwest of the U.S., but currently I am doing a little road trip around the whole country, so you got me about halfway through.
Perfect. That's so exciting. Where are you going to next?
The next big stop will be Seattle, so Pacific Northwest. I'm kind of hitting the corners.
Awesome.
I skipped the Southeast, but yes.
That's so cool. And is that like road tripping or like how are you traveling?
There are two passes that I have that's I'm like driving it. And I have a national parks pass and a pass that gets me into the botanical gardens. And so I'm just kind of bouncing between the parks and the gardens and taking my time going around the perimeter of the country.
That would be so good. I've always wanted to go to the US, but I've never been. But I was looking at the exchange rate the other day and I was like, holy dooly, it is shocking for Australians right now. It's like it's like 50% less. I was like,
really?
Yeah,
wow.
It's hectic. So I was like, because I really, really want to go to, this is going to sound really childish, but this is like my inner child dream right now.
Do it.
Really want to go to Disney World and Disneyland.
I thought that might be what you said.
So bad.
Yes. Well, and like there's so much to do there. I've only been to the Animal Kingdom and then like downtown Disney.
Yeah.
But there's so much to do and so much to see. Like if you're going to make that trip, to have the time and space to just like luxuriate in it makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely. I was thinking maybe like 2 weeks. I was like, I'll spend 1 week at like Disneyland, 1 week at Disney World. I've been thinking about this a lot. I'm going on TikTok. I'm looking at people that are there, recording the rides. And I'm like, I need to go.
Yes. A friend of mine actually got her PhD in like immersive performance in Disney. And so, yes, like there is so much information out there in the world about like how to do Disney right.
Yeah, there is. There really is. But anyway, I'm sidetracking now. I'm really excited to go to the US at some point.
Yeah.
Oh dear. But now, we're actually 12 hours different. So you would be, what's today? Today is Thursday for me. So it would be Wednesday night for you.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm talking from the future. Ooh.
Yeah. It's always fun. I love it when you get to like have that kind of difference.
Always makes it hard to book in a recording, but I'm glad we got a time sorted, which is good.
Yes, definitely.
Perfect. Well, let's get into the thick of things. So if you wouldn't mind telling us like a little bit about, who is Molly? What do you do? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, definitely. So for the work that I do, I am the founder and creative producer of an arts organization called Gray Box Collective that is currently based in the Southwest of the US. And we are celebrating 10 years. This is our 10th
Congrats.
season. Thank you. So very exciting with what we have coming up this season. And I also am a somatic movement educator and therapist. Honestly, it's very similar work that I do in those two spaces, but in the performing arts company, it's with ensembles. And then with the somatic movement work, that's going to be more one-on-one work. But it's a lot of using the arts as a way to really like understand ourselves, understand the world, make sense of it all, and to find some kind of transformation that we're looking for. So those are kind of the big threads. And then I'm also still a freelance artist and I do some of my own stuff on the side as well.
That's amazing. And with your freelance artist work, like what kind of art do you do, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, no, not at all. So dance is my primary discipline. Movement in general is my primary discipline in the performing arts. But kind of my entire life, I've had these parallels between the visual arts world and the performing arts world. And it was just a few years ago I started really merging the two, which has been really fun to be able to take like my first big project was I basically was a human paintbrush.
Oh my gosh, I love
And
it.
I got this giant canvas on the floor. Most of the dance work that I do is like postmodern contemporary, and it's a lot of floor work. And so, like rolling around in the paint and just seeing like the different marks you can make. So yeah,
That would have
that's
been so
what I do.
fun.
Yeah. Oh, it is. I have so much canvas of these giant paintings now. It was really great to just dive in for a few months.
That's awesome. How
Yeah.
cool is that? Well, can you share a little bit about your
Mhm.
journey as an artist and somatic practitioner and how that led you to focus on the intersection of creativity and trauma?
Yes, definitely. And so as I was prepping for this, I was thinking about I was in a matriarchy business school training with Clorinda Trivoli about 3 years ago now, I think. And she asked us to focus in on our origin stories. And in that process, I kind of discovered I've had these blueprints in my life. And one of them was this like being in this space of like just trying to figure it out. Like I can be persistent to a fault, and I am just like I will solve anything that comes at me. And then there's this other blueprint in my journey of reaching my fuck it point. And so I'm either like in there and trying to figure it out, or I am so frustrated, I am done. And then like massive shifts in life, right? And so it's kind of been these two blueprints that have been the journey for very long. I'd say probably until about 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, because what I realized is that both of those really kept me in these cycles of burnout, right? Like I would try to figure something out and just burn out doing that, right? You're spinning your wheels. And then reaching a fuck it point isn't exactly like a great place to be either, although I think it serves its purpose. Both of them do. But to work so hard or to get so frustrated in order to change my life, I have to like really be at a breaking point. That also wasn't the ideal way to go about things. And so it's kind of in this crash and burn that I like really like living in Phoenix, Arizona, right? Like the phoenix rising from the ashes felt very, very like just like the environment and matching my internal experience. And I've actually met a lot of people over the years in Phoenix that have come to Phoenix because they felt they needed a massive transformation in their life and that their life was burning down and they wanted to be that phoenix rising out of it. So maybe
Wow.
somewhere, right? That's what pulled me to Phoenix, because it's definitely as soon as I moved to like Phoenix proper, that I kind of had my own full crash out. And in that, kind of shifting my thoughts a little bit about this body of work that I do. Because in many ways, being an artist, a somatic practitioner, I spent about 10 years working in higher education and in the fitness industry. And it was a lot of these pieces, right? So thinking of it as a constellation and really looking at the body of work, my professional life as this constellation and trying to figure out like, how does it all relate? Besides just like, obviously, I'm the one doing it. And out of it, I found these threads, right, of movement and wanting to understand what interrupts the full expression of it. And even working in higher education, I was working with curriculum design. I was working in academic advising. So it's still like, how are you moving through a system? How are you moving through a semester? Like, how are you going to move through whatever your course is, your degree is? How are you moving students through that, right? So there is still that movement. And a lot of that role of academic advising was also, how are we getting through the hoops? How are we getting through the barriers that are preventing a student from persisting and finally completing? So I think that's something that once I was able to see those threads, like it's really about movement for me. It's really about understanding what's getting in the way of that efficient or full expression of movement, that led me to being able to step back from like it's a title or it's a job to working for myself full time. And even like in my company, one of the things I ask is like, what are clues? Or in like some of the consulting stuff I do as well. Now I ask like, what are the clues that you are where you are right now? And like, can you go back to like the earliest clue? And if I go back to some of my earliest clues, I don't know if you're familiar with the movie, and I guess now it's a show, Xanadu with Olivia Newton-John.
No, but do tell.
80s. They're on roller skates for the whole thing. Had it on VHS. And there's this scene in that movie where there's like an old school bandstand and like an 80s hair metal band, and the two genres mix. And I used to rewind and watch that scene over and over and over again. And I think that's where like my fascination of putting together or figuring out how things can come together that seem separate kind of came from or originated. And so like the intersection of trauma and creativity kind of feels like that, right? Yeah. A lot of people aren't like, oh, these two things belong together in a conversation. But it's something that's always been kind of a part of my journey or part of a fascination I have. How can we find those connections and things that maybe don't typically hang out together?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. And it's actually giving me a few light bulb moments actually while we've been talking, because I really feel like I can resonate in the sense that, like, for example, like on my day-to-days, I'm often really busy and I work really fast and I can feel my body getting like really like this. So I'm like, oh, I got to do this. I got to get that done. And I'm like that. And then I have these moments throughout the day where I'm like, why am I working in that way? And why is my body feeling like that? Like, I don't like that I'm carrying all this tension and I'm just like, feeling so on edge. I was like, so how do I move through my work that, like it's important, I got to get stuff done, but without having these types of reactions like physically. Yes. So that's something I've been thinking about a lot lately. Yeah. So that was what was kind of coming to my mind when you were talking.
Yeah. Well, and I think that was one of my epiphanies with running my company. When I first started, it's, the trauma of working in an institution of higher education. All I did was replicate that, that system that burned me to the ground and was utter chaos. I was like, it's what I know. So we are gravitating towards what's familiar. And if we're familiar with chaos, we're going to replicate it. And to be able to take that moment, like to be aware of what's happening in your body and then be like, I don't actually have to do this way. right? Like, how could I move through this differently? And I actually think about like choreographing workflows a lot in my businesses. Like, how do
Yes.
we like enjoy this dance a little bit more instead of the frenetic
Yeah.
energy that we are so used to?
Yes, yeah, and that's something that I'm trying to explore a little bit more. And I know,
Mm,
like for me, I've just been trying to. I don't know, I haven't got it figured out yet, but I've just been taking breaks. I've just like many
good.
breaks. So I'll
Yes.
just like step away from the computer for like a good like
Yeah.
10-15 minutes, and I'm like, all
Mhm.
right, I need to just calm my body down.
Yeah.
I don't want to stay in that heightened space. Let's
Yeah.
just regulate again, get my bare feet out on the ground. But yeah,
Yeah.
maybe I don't know, this could be something more that I could be doing there as well that could keep my productivity still the same and not having
Yeah.
to take, like, I guess, as many breaks. But I don't
Mhm.
know. What would you
Yeah.
suggest in that
Yeah.
space?
Well, first of all, like you're interrupting the pattern, right? Like your
Yeah.
movement already is like, oh, it's just go, 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 go. So being able to
Yeah.
interrupt it already, you're building a new habit.
Yeah.
So like that's gorgeous. Then it becomes like starting to question or to understand the senses that are coming up, what sensory stuff is coming up for you. And you said it kind of like builds and there's a lot of tension. So it could even be like, how are you setting up, right? Like, how is your space set up? Like, can you have movement that's going to happen more naturally while you're working? And I
Mm.
am also someone who can like I can dial in, right? Sometimes, um, but so much of that can also be coming from our eyes and like we think about, right, like we're just looking at one screen, but really we're darting, right? We're checking the time, we're looking at way too many tabs probably. We have multiple screens and we're looking at our different applications, whatever it is. And that darting eye movement is something that can start to heighten and kick up that sympathetic nervous system response or our fight flight response, our more
Yeah.
mobilized response. But we're stuck in one space. So that could also be a little bit of a freeze response because our eyes are doing all this movement that is saying, like, we should be more mobile, but our body is stuck. And so sometimes just taking a break, even to like let your eye movement be really slow. Like
Mm.
I think about like if there's like a ladybug crawling across the top of the screen or something, just like letting your eyes slowly move or using your finger and following it can also be something just to start to tone that down a little bit.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm definitely going to take that on board because yeah, it's something I've been thinking about a lot lately. So I'm really glad this timed
Oh,
well with
cool.
this recording.
Yeah, yay.
So, what inspired you to develop trauma informed
Yes.
creative practices, and how
Mhm.
do you see creativity playing a role in healing from trauma?
This is like my favorite thing to talk about. So, trauma informed creative practices, very specifically, is a framework that was born out of an ensemble devising process, meaning that we were in a group developing new work. And this like goes back to my undergrad, like 2007. And in that process, we were making a show about sexual violence on college campuses. And what I observed was the ensemble, the performers were starting to really soak in the content of the show, meaning that it was like seeping into their dreams at night, including like some of them, including people who had never had a sexual experience in their life, were having dreams that they were being raped at night. Others, one, he was a bystander in the show, and he would have these dreams of reaching out to help people, and his hands would turn to sand. And
Mm.
so all of that was like being a part of them, right? And it was a relatively short rehearsal process. And so from that experience, those observations, and like I was 20 at the time, so you know, I was also trying to work through my own shit at that time. But one of the questions that I left that experience with was how can we create these socially relevant ensemble devised performances on difficult topics without harming the people involved in the process. Because I believe in the power of the arts. I believe that these shows are really important to be producing. And if we're hurting people while we're doing it, that's not okay.
Yeah.
And I think in the arts, there can be that kind of like, you work your body and like point, if you're a ballet dancer on point, like you just have bloody shoes, like you can destroy yourself in the process of making art. And I don't believe that is the way that we should be creating art in this world.
Yeah.
And so over the course of roughly the next 10 years or so, I continued to produce this work in different iterations with different ensembles. And it really wasn't until 2018 that I started talking about it as trauma-informed creative practices. And so often in the arts, we only talk about trauma when it's the content of the work. So if there's a rape scene, if there's a murder or a mass shooting, something that is in many ways like no one's going to argue with you that like it's traumatic, right? But we don't talk about how the actual process could also be traumatic. So in trauma-informed creative practices, we're looking at the content as well as the creation process itself. It started in that ensemble process, but then it became a framework that I also brought into the classroom when I was teaching, partially because I was burning out and by seeing students burn out. And it was like, well, let's see if this framework that is really helpful and supportive in a rehearsal space also works in a classroom setting. It really was helpful. I noticed a huge difference in myself. I noticed a huge difference in how students were engaging in classroom materials. And so that was where I played with it the most. And then more recently, once I went through the somatic movement educator and therapist training, then I also start to bring that framework into one-on-one sessions. And so like it looks a little different in all of those spaces, but like the heartbeat of it is still there. And trauma-informed creative practices, like primarily used in a rehearsal or classroom setting, like the purpose isn't necessarily to be there to heal.
Yeah.
Right. But I think it's this really beautiful byproduct that comes with it. And with creativity and trauma, what's fascinating to me about the relationship between these two is when we go through something traumatic, and I'd say even burnout counts in there, we experience diminished creativity. And that's a phrase I'm pulling from the book Trauma Stewardship. But our creativity, our access to being creative is going to shrink. And what's wild to me is engaging in creative acts actually brings it back and helps us move through trauma. So it's like the thing that takes it away is also the thing that gives it back.
I love that.
Right? And right, it's this like fascinating dynamic, I think. And so like that works really well one-on-one or just flying solo. And then in group settings, I think it's really about being able to engage with others in those heightened states. So again, like if we're in this fight, flight response, and maybe we've been there because we needed to mobilize to survive, being in a space where we are dancing together, we are making theater together, we're mobilizing together in a way that provides a really brave and supportive environment where we can experience that mobilization in a new context. So we're not mobilizing to survive, we're mobilizing to be together and to build connection and belonging. So that's kind of the like range of how trauma-informed creative practices came to be and how I'm using it right now.
Amazing. It's like, it makes sense though. It really does. Like I'm a
Right?
very creative person, and actually a lot of burnout will diminish that creativity. Like if I'm
Yeah.
working way too hard and I'm not like having time to play and just like,
Mhm.
yeah, have fun and be creative, I
Yes.
find it really hard to then tap into that creative energy. It's just like,
Yeah.
it's gone.
Exactly.
And then I get stuck because I'm like, well, I need to be able to tap into my creativity
Yeah.
to do a lot of the work that I want to do. It's
Mhm.
very much a part of
Mhm.
me, but
Yep.
yeah, and then I have to take a total time out to like recharge and like bring it
Yes.
back.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. And I think, and I don't totally have like the research to back this up, but I think there's different kinds of creativity too, right? There is the creativity that's purely born out of survival needs.
Yeah.
Like that's, I think, pulling more from anthropology. They talk about creativity as one of like our oldest skills. And it's like, yeah, but like that's a different kind of creativity than maybe what we're seeing today, where we have a lot of our basic needs hopefully being met, so that the creativity can also be much more embodied and can be about expression, and not just the survival side.
Yeah, I didn't even think about it like that. But yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. Now, you've worked in both higher education, as you mentioned before, and the fitness industry as well. So, how have those experiences shaped your approach to teaching and somatic practices?
Yes. So I am an educator at my core. It's like in my DNA. I come from a long line of educators. So that's going to come up and out in the work that I produce and in one-on-one settings with clients as well. And it's not like educational performances, but there is a side of it where we're taking maybe a more intellectual approach to performance. And even when I went through the somatic movement therapist and educator training, like you have the option under the International Somatic Movement Educators and Therapists Association to just be one or the other. And it was really important to me to have both, because I think education is such an important part of understanding who we are, how we're operating in the world, that like I don't see it being separate. And then just teaching high school and college students primarily for nearly 10 years. Like you get really good at improvising, you get really good at meeting people where they are at, just to be able to roll with things, to be able to like have a concrete lesson plan and then throw it out the window in order to meet the needs of the people in the space. Being able to also work with like such a wide variety, especially in the fitness industry. Like whoever showed up to my classes, like you were in my class and like I was going to be there to offer you something today. So being able to quickly introduce, connect, assess, understand why someone is showing up, and then being able to do that for a room of 20 potential strangers on a regular basis, I think is a really unique muscle, no pun intended, to be worked in the as a group fitness instructor, because you really have to learn these like varied teaching approaches so that you can. I mean, you don't have to. I felt it was part of the integrity and responsibility as a person running that space. That like, how can I adapt quickly and be able to say things in as many different ways as possible so that people are understanding what we're doing in that day.
Yeah.
And yes, it's the fitness industry. And also, I have my master's in education that looks specifically at student development theory, which is under the umbrella of educational psychology. And the theories and practices that I learned in that program, like I still use them daily. And it heavily informs actually even trauma informed creative practices, but also like how I'm structuring a space at all times. So even though I've left those industries, they're very much a part of me. And I'm so grateful for those experiences.
Thank you so much for sharing
Yeah.
that. Could you talk about how trauma impacts the body's movement and its expression in creative forms? I feel like we've touched on this a little bit, but let's go a little bit
Yeah.
deeper.
Yeah, definitely. So just acknowledging once again, like the idea of movement isn't just human movement per se, in like dance or fitness. I'm also thinking about how humans move through a system, how humans' movement impacts our environment as well. And then in terms of what is interrupting it, I'm thinking chronic illness, stress, trauma, burnout, injury, systemic issues. Like it's all of that to me. And I see it all through the lens of movement. One way that it can show up in us, sometimes our breath can get stuck in a specific pattern. That is one that I think is not talked about enough. That, if we have an experience where we suddenly breathe in, or we intentionally our body is setting us up for more shallow breathing and faster breath, that might be a breath pattern that we get stuck in, which then cues our nervous system to stay stuck in that pattern as well. And breath is actually one thing I normally don't teach in group settings because you never know what kind of breath patterns are in the space. And, we all just breathe like we do without questioning it too much. And so I typically find that it can be quite activating to work
Yeah,
with.
absolutely.
Yeah. And then also, like, our bodies can wind and turn away from things. I actually it was like a taboo TED talk, an underground scene.
Love
And
it.
yes. And the talk I gave was like, the title was Yes, Your Vibrator Can Be Your Therapist. And talking
Nice.
about like the one, right? Talking about like how we can have these winding patterns in our bodies towards pain or towards pleasure, and how that can connect to like how we're experiencing that, whether it's flying solo or with a partner or partners. But like that winding can be in our body because we will turn away from things that have hurt us. So that's where we can get some imbalances in our body. I think the other way that movement can show up or trauma can show up in our bodies that I find really interesting is typically it comes out in more rigorous classes. I'm thinking very specifically of some students I've had in even like a power yoga class, or a dance class, where they experience and feel their power for the first time. They feel the strength back within them. And that could be maybe trying to, at one point in their lives, push someone away and they couldn't push that person away. But suddenly in a chaturanga or doing push-ups for some conditioning, their body finally completes that push. It finally completes that stored energy that they weren't able to. And so it can suddenly bring back energy or emotions that are really surprising, because you're like, I'm just doing a chaturanga, I'm just doing a push-up, something like that. And suddenly it can bring us back to another time and space. So those are just a few examples that I don't think I hear about a lot, but are definitely the ones that I find really interesting, especially like feeling our power, I think, because it can pop up in the most random places.
Oh, absolutely. And it actually brought to mind, because I've been diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress disorder.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I used to experience, I don't really experience it anymore. It was very, very rare. But if I get like triggered by something that reminds me of a certain event, then my whole body like reacts. So, like for example, I used to play like AFL, like footy,
Mm-hmm.
and I was training, and I just remember feeling, what was it? It was like I was just like so out of breath at one point, and then it just all of a sudden I was getting like flashbacks. I was just going through this experience like again, and then I just had a full blown like panic attack on the field, and I had to go, and I was like, I cannot
Mm-hmm.
actually manage this right now. But it just came
Yeah.
on like so suddenly from
Yeah.
whatever I was doing, whatever I was moving and
Yep.
doing, and it
Yeah.
just activated it straight
Yeah.
away.
Yes. Well, and I think at least in the US, and I think maybe Europe as well, but the language around like the body keeps the score is very
Yes,
popular. Yes.
it is. Yeah.
Yes. I prefer, there's another book called The Body Remembers, and I
Okay.
find it just a little softer in a way that like I'm not in competition with like my body keeping the score. Like No, the body remembers. And
Yes.
sometimes it remembers at really inopportune times, or times when you're like, what? No, what? Well, I don't
Trying to
remember
train
now.
here.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it was fascinating though. I remember I was just so like blindsided by it. I was like, what the hell like just happened? I was like, I was
Yeah.
literally just training, and
Yes.
yeah, I just all of a sudden was back in this
Mhm.
dark place and having a really bad panic attack. It was it was
Yeah.
awful. Mm.
Yeah.
All right, listen up, legends. If you're looking to experience the real Western Australia, there's no better way than with Why Not Bus, who is one of our sponsors. I've actually been on their tour, and let me tell you, it is awesome, awesome vibes, epic adventures, and I made lifelong friends. We're talking snorkeling with sea lions, manta rays, whale sharks, camping under the stars, and taking your time to enjoy the beauty of WA. Use my discount code PARIS2025 and get $300 off your next tour. Go to www.whynotbus.com.au. Okay, so how do you incorporate somatic practices into your creative processes?
Yeah.
And how do you see that influencing the emotional or social well-being of your audience?
I guess maybe I should zoom out for a second and define somatics. Because I
Yeah,
know
go
that,
for it.
yeah, yeah. Because I know there's a lot out there. And I think the English language has some limitations when it comes to words and communication. So somatics, I think, has gotten a little watered down in some spaces. It's been used as just to replace like the idea of mind body or body mind or holistic.
Yeah.
But when I'm talking about somatics, I use a lot of Stacey K. Haynes definitions and understanding like mind body connection in relationship to the world around us. So to me, that is what somatics is about. It's not just, I'm going to go sit and do some breath work. I'm going to go do yoga. To me, it's a much more broad experience. And it's much more about being more than doing for me. And I think we can do the exercises and that can lead to the being. However, ultimately to me, it's about being able to take it further. Like about your meditation practice, perhaps. Like we create these perfect environments where we can meditate for a few minutes and then like we pop up and we get on our phones and we check our email and everything, takes off. But how can we take what we do in that meditative practice and carry it and allow it to really ripple out and still be in that connection, mind, body, spirit in relationship to the world around us without that kind of frenetic energy too, right?
Yeah.
So it's this way of being, including in creative processes, whether that is, the arts, but even running businesses is a creative act as well. And so being able to bring that level of wholeness into it, and thinking about more embodied leadership, especially for me running Gray Box Collective, is how can we center our nervous system and the nervous systems of all the people involved, and do so in a really supportive way. For Gray Box, one way that we do this is actually through the music and sound design. We've done some things like 432 hertz frequency is the like most soothing frequency. Yeah. We will intentionally put that as the like base layer in our sound design so that the audience always has that, even though we might be dealing with really difficult stuff on top of it. We've got some kind of grounding, foundational sound that the audience can grab onto that's very familiar. So that's one way that we bring that culture of care into all the work that we do, even for our audiences.
Yeah, okay, amazing. And it's also fascinating to me as well, because I even liked how you explained what somatics is, because I think as I agree in the sense that it is very confusing out there because there's so many different ways that people interpret that. But I mean, it makes sense that we'd want to learn how to do these practices, but carry it on into our day to day. So not just meditating for that moment and then getting on with life, like carrying that same energy into your day to day, that same clarity, and continuing on being in that space.
Yeah. And specifically for me, the somatic movement is a huge part of it, right? Somatic movement educator therapist. And so that's coming from that dance background. It's rooted in whole body movement. That's much more active. And yes, we need those more receptive or more passive practices. And yes, they can also be in stillness. And can we also bringing back like being able to mobilize, right? Because that's going to bring stuff up. So how can we still engage with that as well?
I'm actually going to throw in another question as well, just totally random for you. But what are some somatic practices or things that you do like on your day-to-days that help you?
Yeah. Ooh, fun question. Especially right now as I've been doing a lot of traveling. So I'm definitely like working the whole toolkit lately. One that I have been really intentional about as I've been traveling is in every place where I'm stopping, I just do a quick body scan to see like what am I picking up on? How is the environment that's changing on a daily basis impacting me on a physical level? And some of that's coming from this past year has been a really difficult year for my physical and mental health. And I have wondered the role of my environment in that journey. And so plunking myself down in all these different environments for several months, it's like, okay, what am I feeling? Where do I feel really solid or really grounded? I went back to my undergrad campus and I felt this like really wild expansion between my shoulder blades that I hadn't felt anywhere else.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, so just like these little body scans throughout the day. For me, it's been intentional there. And then anytime, like this has also been about disrupting my own patterns. And with that, wherever there's disruption, I find there is space for something new. And so getting back into more of a physical practice, noticing, I do a lot more, I think, observing right now. And I notice when I sigh and not in a like, I'm bored kind of a way, but in a like, ooh, I feel safe here. Like physically, psychologically, I feel like I can relax. I can let that tension go. I'm not bracing for anything. I also notice when I yawn as just like, I think of it as like a little stick shift of our nervous system, that something just needed to change in that moment. So a lot more observation right now on a regular practice. And then with that observation, also going into some tools just to like counter driving so much, to counter a lot of sitting and all of that, just to like put all the pieces back together.
Amazing. And for someone who was, say, wanting to start like implementing that into their day to day, what would you suggest that they
Yeah.
start with?
Yeah, start small. Start small with something that seems manageable. If you can start with observation, I think that's a great place to start because like our bodies are designed to keep us in that like space where we do feel safe, right? I think when it comes to trauma responses, stress responses, they often get a really bad reputation because they show up at times we don't want them to. But if we can see it as information, then it's about holding on to that information and being able to amplify it. So one observation, maybe you notice if you're like standing, waiting in line somewhere, or even if you're like seated, maybe there's some movement that you do that's really small but really repetitive. Like if you're standing, maybe you're swaying side to side while you're like waiting for the line or whatever. Or maybe if you're sitting, you've got a leg bounce or you're clicking a pen. That's just information of where some excess energy might be. So how can you work with that excess energy? Maybe it's doodling with a pen. Maybe it is just consciously making that sway side to side even bigger. And just notice what changes within you from there. Because we're already doing it. It's just about really bringing our attention to it and working with it in perhaps a new way.
Amazing. Thank you so much. You did so well with me throwing in some new questions.
Yeah, I love it.
I appreciate it. Appreciate it. So can you tell us more about like the Grey Box Collective
Yeah.
and the projects you've produced around
Mhm.
social and emotional well-being, and what role does art play in navigating some tough subjects?
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about Gray Box first. So, in a nutshell, Gray Box Collective, we make weird art about tough stuff. And I'll define weird as abstract or nonlinear. If we had the budget, it would probably go way more avant garde than it does, but it's very experimental. So, things outside of the norm, and we're looking for new ways of expressing ideas. And the tough stuff, that can be in the eye of the beholder in many ways. But I also kind of feel like most subjects can eventually make their way into a tough conversation in some way, shape, or form. And we mostly produce performances, and I think of them as these artistic vehicles for embodied activism and social transformation, because we are touching into subjects that are somewhat global, somewhat finding common ground. This past year, we started 4 new works. One was about compassion fatigue, one was about grief. Another was titled Soul Nostalgia. So it was looking at climate change. And soul nostalgia is nostalgia for a place that we can't return to due to the changing climate, and how that environmental impact has resulted in like not being able to go back to a place that maybe was home or was a warm fuzzy memory in some way. And then the last piece that we revisited last year, that's going to be the big one for this year. The piece is called Finger Painting for Grown-ups, and it's
I
looking
love it.
at, yes, it's looking at busy culture, hustle culture, kind of like
Yeah.
how capitalism kills our creativity. And it's actually the piece that inspired the formation of Gray Box Collective. But we never have formally produced it. So we're bringing back original cast members. And we're kind of like, yes, it technically already exists, but we're starting over, especially right now in the US with so much upheaval, so much has changed. Like, what does it mean to produce this work right now? And it's been so like wonderful. We're just doing virtual rehearsals right now, and it is a really just, I don't know, just it feels very timely,
Mm.
and it feels like this was the right year for that piece to come back. And with all of these pieces in the performance itself, we partner with mental health professionals and different organizations to also engage in dialogue after each show. So with the audience, with the creative team, with the mental health professionals, we get to do some deep dives into the content of the show and really design the evening to spark conversation and get to that point where we can have a completely open dialogue. Our spaces are more intimate shows. We have most of our audiences are under like 75, maybe 50 people, so that we can really talk and connect. So it's a way for, I think, the artist to feel seen and to understand and make meaning of the world, but also through that process, through that journey the artist takes, the audience also feels that, and then we get to talk about it. Yeah, it's just been something where we're able to build those connections
I love it.
outside of our heads. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's quite like interactive in the sense of all like at the after the show, you can
Yes.
actually, collectively get together and go through these
Yeah.
things. I love that. That's really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, it's really about creating that space and trying to just like push the arts in even subtle ways. Like one thing we did this past year was partner with a bunch of non-alcoholic companies,
Yeah.
and they donated things because so often in the arts it's a cash bar, it's an open bar, and you go mingle, and it's like I'm not going to do a show about trauma and be like, and here's some alcohol, like
Enjoy. Yeah.
I've always felt right. Like I've always felt squishy about that.
Yeah.
So really creating a sober space to have these conversations that doesn't feel super awkward.
And I think that's really important because that's something that I often think about that a lot because I've been to a lot of different, whether it's even been a seminar or someone, talking about these like really important topics like mental health and trauma and things like that. And a lot of the time they will be serving alcohol. And I'm just like,
Yes.
is this the space for it? But it's really,
Right?
it's really common though. Like it's just,
Mhm.
it's not even a single thought. But I think, if we're talking about these topics, they need to be held in a really safe space. So I love that you've taken that into consideration with your shows. And so like, is there a particular place that you guys host these shows? Is it the same place or do you travel around, or like how does that work?
Yeah. So over the past decade, we've done our tours around locally. We have gone outside of Phoenix as well and performed at fringe festivals. But for the most part, we do look for non-traditional spaces, and that is intentional, right? And I think in order to like open our brains to these conversations, it's
Yeah.
also going into a performance space where those expectations aren't there, right? Like if we were in a theater with a balcony and like the fancy like opening of the stage and
Mm,
the curtains, right? Like you go in and you instantly are like, this is going to be my role in that space.
yes.
Versus you walk into like this little, like we've been in warehouses, we've been in vacant restaurants. You walk in with a kind of this unknown or this open sense of expectations. And so I think that's part of what can really support and feed the dialogue is that you don't know what to expect. So therefore you kind of roll with it and soak up. Luckily we have returning people who kind of like lead the way, right? You kind of soak up what the culture is of the space. So we get to start over in many ways to set the expectation and the culture that like, yeah, we're going to talk. Like performers are out in the audience when the house opens. You're talking to
Mm.
them before the show. They're not like,
Oh,
you
I
know,
love that.
yeah,
That's really cool. I really like that aspect of it because I feel like that just makes it so much more immersive. Like you're not just
yes,
on the outside looking in, like you're a
yeah,
part of it.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So, what advice would you offer educators or artists looking to create a safer, more supportive space for students or participants dealing with trauma?
So I don't think I've talked about like safety yet and how I define it and think about it. When I think about safe spaces, I think about psychological safety and I think about physical safety. Because especially in theater spaces, in the arts, like there are people whose entire career is circled around like making sure people are physically safe, like the stuff being hung over our heads isn't going to fall. And I think what's not talked about as often is the psychological safety. And so that is the idea of like whether or not it is okay for me to show up authentically, to voice my opinions, to share my ideas, whether or not that feels safe. Also, I think about that a lot more instead, like safety's in the eye of the beholder. I get to choose whether or not it's safe for me to show up fully, right? So when I'm facilitating a space, whether it's a classroom, whether it's a rehearsal, whether it's consulting or one on one work, I am focused on creating a space that is brave and supportive. And I think from there, we can get that sense of psychological safety. But I don't get to choose that for anyone. I will not say in any rehearsal space or classroom, like this is a safe space, because I don't get to determine that.
Yeah.
That is what the participants get to choose. And so, really focusing on that. And it's amazing to me how often people say, like, well, Molly says this is a safe space. And it's like, Molly doesn't say that. You will not hear me say that. That is not a phrase that's in my vocabulary. But what it says to me is that that brave and supportive space is translating as like, oh, it's a safe space for me as a
Mm.
participant. So I think that's a huge thing to think about as an artist or as an educator, any kind of facilitator. I also think when it comes to trauma informed, whatever practices, wherever you're applying them, going slow because you just don't know what's going to come up. And even as you do your own work, if you choose to go through some kind of trauma informed training as a facilitator, I think of it as this like healthy downward spiral. Like you can really unearth some things that you did not know was within yourself. And so I think it's important to go slow so that you can really tend to whatever comes up. I definitely like the visual in my head right now is like you're kind of going through the soil and digging around, and it's like, ooh, found like all these rocks, and like, yeah, maybe you're planting some seeds, but like they need some nurturing, they need some time to really put it into practice.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really bang on as well, because even through my alcohol and other drug studies, that's something that we've
Yeah.
really had to talk about if we're facilitating like groups or, bringing anyone into a space where we're talking about like those tough topics, is making sure that we're looking after everyone within that space, because we never know what could come up for them, what could be a trigger. And as well, like giving people that space to also respond. So not shutting it down either. It's just like, okay, like, if you're feeling a certain way, like just give me a little like, and I'll come over and we can like go have a chat outside, or we can do this.
Mhm.
And really just making that person still feel like, okay, like
Mhm.
I've got an option to exit, or I've got an option to go speak to someone who is available right there. And all I need to
Yeah.
do is just raise my hand or do a certain signal.
Yeah, yeah, no, totally. And I think it goes back to that somatic practice, right?
Yeah.
Of like, how can we be in that space and not do? And I think there's a lot out there around like, oh, to be trauma informed, do this following checklist, all these bullet points, and you're magically trauma informed. And it's like, not quite.
Yeah.
You've got to have that within yourself to a certain point and understand your own triggers and your own activations, because that is
Mm.
what a group will challenge you around. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's something that has even come up for me with some of like my beta clients that I have for an alcohol and
Mm.
other drug service
Yeah,
that I'm building in the background at the moment.
yeah.
And it's been interesting because then I can just sometimes see myself in it, and then I'm starting to think of things that I've done that has been similar to their story, and then I've had to like really check myself again and be like, okay, like hold on, this isn't about me. Like let's just let's separate from that. Let's focus on this person and what they're saying. This is their story. It's not
Mhm.
mine. Step
Yep,
back. Like just
exactly.
give that space.
Yep, yep, yes.
Really important, really important. So, what do you hope to see in the future of trauma informed creative work, both in the arts and in broader social or therapeutic contexts?
Yes. So I'm very ready for more nuanced conversations and unpacking some of the harder pills to swallow, if you will, in the context of trauma informed work. I think it was interesting. I think 2020 and lockdown in the US and the global pandemic, I think it really ignited this conversation around trauma, but it almost like got away from itself a little too far too fast. I think it's quieting down now. And those of us that have been doing trauma for a while, like before 2020, when I was doing this work, like I had to convince people that trauma was like a thing we needed to talk about. And then like 2020 happened and people are like, oh my God, have you heard of trauma? And it's like, yeah, I have. Sit down. Like, yes, this is a thing that lots of people have talked about for a much longer time than just like
Of
the
course.
calendar
Yeah.
counting. Yeah. And I think the conversation in some places got watered down. I think it got too broad. I think it became a little too, I don't know, common language in a way and just
Mm,
used perhaps a little too liberally
yeah.
of just like, oh, that's my trauma. And it's like, is it your trauma or is it just uncomfortable or is it just difficult or is it just
Yes.
hard?
Yeah.
Not, yeah, like one of my things is anything can be a trauma response. That doesn't mean that everything is a trauma response.
Absolutely.
Yes. And with that, also like acknowledging that trauma is in the eye of the beholder, right? So it's kind of this back and forth as well of like, can we start to question gently whether or not what someone might be experiencing is trauma? And like context matters a lot in this one, right? Because I do believe trauma is in the eye of the beholder, safety is in the eye of the beholder. right? Like that is up to you. But how can we get curious about that in a way that invites conversation, especially in our one-on-one interactions? I think I'd love to see more of that happening.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I agree. I'm right with you there actually,
Yeah.
because yeah, I see that a lot, even on social media. Like particularly, it's definitely becoming a bit of a what is it, like a pop? What is it?
Yeah. Pop
Psychological?
psychology.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's something that I think people still struggle with, and I
Yeah.
also have noticed a lot of people still watering down their own trauma because of all these,
Mm,
the way that people talk about it, and then they think,
yeah.
oh well, mine's not as bad as that, and
Mm-hmm.
it's
Oh, the comparison. Yes.
yeah, so I do see a lot of that. I get a lot of feedback on that, and people
Yeah.
will often be like, oh, but that's not, it's not a big deal, or even they might even
Right.
compare it to me as like, but nothing like you, what you went through. And I'm like, hey, like
Mm-hmm.
let's not do that. Let's just
Yeah.
remember that what you've gone through is just as important. Like there's no
Yes.
comparison here.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
trauma.
Yeah, exactly. And to a certain extent, like, trauma is trauma is trauma is trauma, right? Whatever it stems from, it's a lot about how we're holding it within ourselves.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And I
And
think
what
that's the
I
most important
perceive,
part.
yeah. And, what I perceive versus what you perceive versus the next person perceives, it's all going to be different.
Yeah.
And I think maybe it's like fine tuning almost the perception a little
Yeah.
bit more.
Yeah, and just like allowing yourself to feel what you're feeling, and not to shut it
Mhm.
down, or to feel like it's not
Mhm.
worth feeling, or it doesn't have that value. Like I think it's really important to still acknowledge all of that.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Totally. The whole journey is worth
Mhm.
acknowledging. Yes.
Yes, absolutely. So, to wrap things up, what would you tell someone who's looking to start their own journey of healing through creativity or movement, but might feel hesitant or unsure where to begin?
I got several different options here.
Go for it.
So, and kind of echo to what I mentioned earlier, but like start where you are, like meet yourself where you are at, in things that feel really doable. Because also, if we are in maybe more of a fight flight response, some of the tools that like the world says we should be doing to go through this might not actually be matching our nervous system state appropriately. So check in with yourself as much as you can. And if like you see something somewhere and you're like, I think that might be interesting, do it. And the beautiful thing about creativity is like you can engage in like bad, quote unquote, bad art making, and it will have the same effect of if you were like the best artist in the world about it. There's actually a chronic illness group I'm a part of on Facebook where it's basically like on every Wednesday, everyone shares their bad art. Just like keep producing it, keep engaging with it. And maybe you get better, maybe you don't, but it's really that practice of being with that art making and being in that creative place, that is the important muscle to work with. And then I think one that can be really challenging, is if we feel we're in more of a frozen state, more of a stuck freeze response. And, with the idea of freezing, right? Like we have to thaw that out. And it takes time, and like tiny movement is really helpful. Scribbling, wiggling in some way. Just start small, and know that that's where it can grow from there, right? It can ripple out, it can expand if that feels like the right fit. But yeah, so, engage poorly, quote unquote, with your art making. Allow it to be small, especially if you're more of a freeze response. And another one I've been thinking of, especially as like my physical ability has really changed a lot over the past year. I've also been thinking about ways that we can be moved by the world around us while we are technically in stillness. I've been by the ocean a lot, been by lakes, and like, just sitting on a dock or floating on the lake or some body of water, a pool. Like, how can the water be moving you? How can you be in a hammock, a rocking chair, any other kind of surface that allows you to find movement without you having to be the one producing it?
I like that.
Yeah, right. And like the world moves us whether we want to acknowledge it or not. But how can we start to find like the soothing ways to engage with the world around us as another way to introduce more movement into our bodies as a starting point for that healing journey?
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Just before you go, though, if there's anyone who's interested in connecting with you,
Mhm.
coming to a show, any of your
Yeah.
somatic services, what is the best way for them to reach you?
Yes. So my website's probably best. And then from there, you can find all the things. So mollywskank.com. And from there, you can find Trauma Informed Creative Practices. You can find Gray Box Collective. We can work one-on-one. I am also on social media, and all of that is linked on my website. And I also have like ranges from like free to low cost resources on there, so that you can
Beautiful.
find ways to tap in before like fully diving into.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I'll definitely put that in the show notes. So go look in the description if you're wanting to have a look at that. But thank you. Thank you again for coming on. I really, really appreciate it. And I'm sure we'll chat soon.
Yes, sounds wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
No worries. You have a good night.
Yes.
All
And
right.
you have a good
See ya.
day.
Bye.
Bye.